Shabbat Shalom. I wonder what it would be like for Abraham and Sarah if we picked them out of the Torah and transplanted them here to Los Angeles. I want to leave out the miraculous and the angelic and ask instead, what does the Torah repeatedly tell us about Abraham and Sarah? 4 weeks ago in Parashat Noach, we meet Avram at the end of a run of ancestors who lived remarkably long lives with a father who was 70 years old when he had him. 3 weeks ago in Parashat Lech Lecha, both Abraham and Sarah are described as Zkenim, Ba'im B'yamim, aged, advanced in years. Last week in Parashat Vayera, Sarah's reaction to the angel's prediction is Adoni Zaken, which I want to translate as my husband is not so young anymore. And this week we hear the count of her life, 127 years. And once more, we read from the Torah this morning, V'Avraham Zaken ba b'yamim. What is it that the Torah is underlining for us? Sarah and Abraham are old. So let's bring them here to LA to live out their story. The journey begins when they're already in their 70s. They are blessed to have gotten this far still together. Probably they have well-used passports. They clearly enjoy a long walk, so they have some favorite hiking trails. And maybe they both grew out their grays during COVID. Maybe Abe has a ponytail. Either way, I like to imagine them stylish, and we know that they like to host, with probably a New York Times recipe book for their very frequent dinner parties. But as they look towards their future, as they look towards the ages that the Torah tells us they actually are, 90 and 90 plus, we see their lives become freighted with challenge. They used to be the quick, experienced ones, passing younger folks as they hiked up the hill, nipping skillfully into the one remaining parking space at Starbucks. But now they're becoming invisible. As they slow down, they are overlooked, except when their presence is an irritation. Their friends have fallen away one by one. Some are sick, some have already died. Abraham and Sarah love the home that they've made, and so they stay there, but it's badly adapted for their physical challenges. And it's hard for people to visit them, and they need visits because they don't drive anymore. They're changing cognitively too. The recent Pointer study tells us that a person is diagnosed with Alzheimer's in the United States every 65 seconds. Maybe Abraham has greater cognitive challenges than Sarah. Maybe it's the other way around. But what is it doing to their relationship? And the odds are strongly on that one of them is going to become the other's unpaid carer, like 1 in 4 Americans at the moment. And their accumulated wealth is going to pay for healthcare and for Abraham's housing and care costs after Sarah's death, not to mention the price of her funeral plot and her burial. Sarah and Abraham, welcome to old age. It's a landscape of disrespect and diminution, and it's the current reality for millions of Americans. We have to do better than this. And so we look to our tradition and to our teachers for inspiration. We just read Va'Avraham zaken ba b'yamim. Abraham was aged, well advanced in years. V'Adonai berach et Avraham bakol. God had blessed Abraham with everything. And as we shared with you, and as Rabbi Jensen mentioned, this tiny little word, this three-letter word, bakol, becomes a well into which our commentators gleefully dive to try and tell us what it was that Abraham had. So some of us say that if you add the gematria, if you add the numerical values of the word bakol, they're the same as the word ben, so Abraham had been blessed with a son. And others teach that the reference is to a daughter. Her name, of course, was Bakol. Ramban and Rabbeinu Bachya and the other spiritually inward-looking teachers of the tradition write on this. And they tell us that that word for daughter, bat, is spiritual and not biological. And it represents an additional dimension of the divine that only at that stage of his life manifested herself to Abraham. But by far my favorite interpretation of Bakol comes from the Ishbitzer Rebbe, Mordechai Yosef Lena. In his commentary, Mei HaShiloach, he quotes a teaching from the Talmud on the word kol in a verse from the book of Ecclesiastes in which King Solomon is proclaiming, "This was my portion for all kol, my toil." And in the Talmud, Rav and Shmuel comment on the tone of voice in this verse, and they describe how when Solomon became old, he became more and more helpless, his sphere of influence gradually contracting until he had only control over one single object. And of course they disagree because they're rabbis. One of them says he only had control of his cane, and the other says he only had control of his pitcher, his water jug. But for the Ishbitzer, the cane and the pitcher are symbols of life. For the cane, he brings us a scene imagined by the prophet Zechariah. Thus says the God of hosts, "There shall yet be old men and women in the squares of Jerusalem, each with cane in hand because of their great age, and the squares of the city shall be crowded with children playing in them." A prophecy of anticipated redemption and joy. These canes are symbols of honor and hope and of a life well lived. And what about the pitcher? The Ishbitzer teaches that a pitcher is hollow. And what does it mean to be hollow? It means to be open, to receive it. When the Torah tells us that Abraham was blessed bakol, it's saying that in old age, he became more and more thirsty for the essence of life that God was continually pouring into him. And the older he got, the more hollow he became, and the more of that chiyut, that life force, he became capable of holding. The cane and the pitcher, or in Los Angeles 2025, the walker and the water bottle. Either way, this is a transformational teaching about how to age. I love it because it's real. It takes things away. It subtracts things so that we're left working with only what we've got, and then it makes that enough and more than enough. It turns the emphasis outwards, the canes as a symbol of community lived together, and it places aging deep inside as a richness within that is continually increasing. This is an interpretation of aging that we can build a future on. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying we can or should ignore the realities of getting old. We can't. Let's not be naive. Let me wave my newly arthritic forefinger at you to remind you that change and fragility and ultimately mortality are going to come for all of us. But it matters how we engage with them. It matters how we engage with them as individuals and as a community. We now have to change our aging trajectories, our aging process, beginning here, so that our aging does not look like what I described for a modern Abraham and a modern Sarah. And we need to work with what we've got, placing the emphasis on community, the cane, and on meaning, the picture. So I invite us to imagine. I invite us to imagine sharing where we live so that our resources will go further and last longer, not alone in homes or collective homes that remind us only of the absence of the one we love, but together. It could be as straightforward as moving in with a friend or two, or moving them in with us. It could be as advanced as building a whole village. It could be single generational, what I think of as a Moshe house for grumpy old Jews, or it could be intergenerational. But we need to age with people close by us, in our space, who love us and who know us well. Imagine giving ourselves the grace to prepare ourselves, not only practically, but spiritually, for the experience of becoming older. Asking ourselves, in conversation with our teachers, in conversation with our contemporaries, what really matters at my time of life? What can I let go? What do I still wish to claim? How will I age most truthfully and at my most authentically? And how will the wisdom of my teachers and my friends prepare me? Imagine turning outwards. Imagine getting louder and not quieter as we get older, because you know what? We know more and we've got less to lose. Imagine making our voices and our experiences heard. Imagine ourselves as political and ethical and moral exemplars and mentors. Imagine us, over 60, in the vanguard of a radical and rebellious counterculture of caring. Imagine a new language emerging. We can get rid of seniors, I think. We can definitely get rid of pensioners, which is the equivalent in England. Are we elders? Are we sages? Are we third agers? Or has the language for the fullness of us not been invented yet? And what names are we going to choose for the people with whom we live in community? Because this is my roomie doesn't really cut it. My companion, my dinosaur, my solution, my friend. Imagine new rituals. The Jewish life cycle is sadly bereft of any ritual really beyond a wedding, unless you happen to get divorced, until you get sick or after you've died. It doesn't have to be this way. Rituals for decade birthdays, rituals for every day, for the day that we retire, and for the day that we hand over the car keys, and the day that we move into our new living spaces and wave the moving truck goodbye as it drives away with the stuff we no longer need. Rituals for getting out of hospital, rituals for having rehab, rituals for when we get our first pair of hearing aids. All of these are sacred transitions. Imagine it. We have to imagine it, because if we don't imagine it, we can't build it. And that brings me to one more understanding of that mysterious and beautiful word, bakol. In the language of leadership, teachers differentiate between technical and adaptive challenges in organizations and societies. A technical challenge is one that can be fixed in a straightforward way, but an adaptive challenge requires a different approach. To meet an adaptive challenge, kol, everything, needs to move around and be reconfigured. The constellation itself, the community, the organization, the society must change, all of it, in order for the change that is needed to happen. And aging is an adaptive challenge. It needs curiosity and flexibility and multiple stakeholders and a shift in mindset. The poet Rilke would say that an adaptive change is one where we live into the answers. Living into the answers. It's not such a bad definition of aging, is it? May we be blessed to build a future of canes and pitchers. May we radiate strength even as we become more bent over. May the hollows within us be filled with the essence of the divine, and may it shine out of our eyes and into the world we must now create. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat.